Jump right in. For some folks, some of this information will be a little bit of a refresher for those who participated in the 2019 housing study. But I'm hopeful that if nothing else, it will kind of re-spark some of those conversations and interests in taking some actions in your community to move some housing opportunities forward. Just a quick overview of what I plan to touch on tonight. I'll run through some quick demographic, economic, and housing trends. I'll touch on housing demand that came as a result of the study, opportunities and preferences as it relates to housing in Polk County. We'll touch on some development costs, which we know have been skyrocketing. Cover some housing goals that were established in the housing study. Talk about some housing strategies, and then run through some common hurdles and perhaps some potential solutions that communities in the county can look to as it looks to address the housing shortage and the housing mismatch. So some basic trends as it relates to Polk County. Many of these probably will not be surprising or shocking to you. Most of this data comes from the census as well as the state's population projections. So as it relates to population growth, the state of Wisconsin Department of Administration prepares population and household projections. And so from 2010 to 2040, some areas of the county, specifically town of Osceola, Village of Dresser, really that southwest corner of the county, is projected to see some significant increase in population. For example, in Dresser, as shown on the screen, it's expected to have a population increase of 36%. That said, some areas of the county are expected to have lower growth and even some decline, primarily in the northern communities. So town of Lorraine, Village of Luck, Village of Frederick. Again, that's based on the state's population projections. Now, communities, and I'll touch on this later, communities have the ability, based on your policies, your strategies, your actions, to influence those population projections. So again, that's based on trends that the state looks at, but you do as a county and communities have the ability to influence that. In terms of incomes, there's higher median household incomes and home values, again, Southwest communities, and then of course the lake areas throughout the county. So it's important to recognize that different communities in the county have different demographics, different incomes, different housing situations, land availability, which is critical to having new housing development, and housing needs. And I stress this point throughout the county housing study process, and I'll stress it again. The housing market doesn't stop at your municipal boundaries. So for the Village of Osceola, your housing market goes beyond that. And even at the county level, your housing market goes beyond that. We'll touch on in a little while on commuter trends. And you have the ability to perhaps capture some folks that are coming outside of the county boundary to maybe relocate and live within Polk County. As it relates to, and I apologize for some green line that's on the screen, not sure if that's on your end as well, but you can disregard that on these slides. As it relates to the county's population, the county, again, this is based on the State Department of Administration and their population projections. From 2010 to 2040, you can see that the 65 plus age group is increasing rapidly. This will have a drastic impact and effect on the workforce as well as housing needs. As it relates to household growth, the county is actually in a fairly good position, again, projected to increase from about 16% from 2020 to 2040. It's important, again, to keep in mind, these are just projections, but you have the ability to kind of influence what your future will look like. Again, we're in 2021. We've got 19 years to get to 2040. So there are opportunities. Another thing I want to point out is, again, I touched on the 65 plus population group, but you can see that the 20 to 44 and the 45 to 60, or the 0 to 19 and the 20 to 44 age cohorts, those are also showing some increase. So there are opportunities, and the county is in a good position as it relates to projections. As it relates to households, the number of households is expected to continue to increase over the next 20 years. So that's that blue chart. You can see that it's expected to continue to increase. What is decreasing, that red line, is the size of households. So our households are getting smaller. Again, that's the influence of those baby boomers, our aging demographic group, the graying of the nation, as we talk about, as well as some lower birth rates. So we're going to need more housing, but maybe looking at for smaller households. So perhaps we don't need as large of a housing unit to accommodate some of those smaller households. Looking at the housing stock, now this again is it's 2019 data. So much of the data as it relates to housing and demographics, as I mentioned, comes from the U.S. Census. That the most recent data that we have available is what's called ACS data. So that's looking at data. It's an average over 5 years, and it's sample data. So it's not necessarily 100% accurate. It's not the complete census count, but it's the best data that we have available in terms of demographics and housing information. So a breakdown of Polk County's housing situation. Rental is about 21% as of the 2019 data, and owner housing accommodates and accounts for about 79%. Close to 30% of housing structures in the county were built before 1960. So we're talking 60, plus years old, which could equate to some deteriorating housing, level of maintenance, some required updates that might need to be done to the house. And those are all factors that you need to consider when looking at your housing market. Looking at the rental vacancy rate, so how many rental units were vacant and available for rent? The 2019 data showed about 6%. That number was also around there, even a little higher when we completed the housing study in 2019 when we looked at the data. That was 2017 data at that time. That was the most available data that we had. So I'm estimating, and again, based on the adjustments that were made in the 2017 or in the 2019 study, I'm assuming and guessing that it's likely closer to 3 to 4%, and that might even be high based on current conditions and just what I've heard as it relates to the rental market. 2019 data shows the owner vacancy rate as 1%. So again, there's just not much housing available county-wide. 2019 median gross rent in the county was $756, and the median home value was $169,700. Rents and values continue to go up, and you can see that if you take a look at the 2019 study, which showed the 2017 data, there certainly is an increase. I want to say the median home value maybe increased about $8,000 to $10,000. So when we talk about housing and we talk about incomes, that really informs what's affordable. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, defines an affordable dwelling as one that a household can obtain for 30% or less of its gross income. Now, there are some misperceptions regarding the term affordable. Really what that word and term means is how much housing can a household attain based on its household income. The goal really is to have a mix of housing that is affordable or attainable for all income groups in the community and the county. And so it's really providing housing for all. We looked at income constraints, so those that have very limited incomes. The workforce, we know that housing is critical to having a strong workforce, as well as just your market rate housing for those that can afford market rate. And so I know that Terry and at the EDC and the Housing Committee, they're really focused on that workforce housing, that supply of housing that meets the needs of the workforce in the community. So we're going to touch on that and some potential strategies to consider as it relates to incorporating and improving the housing situation. 2019 county-wide, about 41% of rental households in the county were housing cost burdened. So they spent more than 30% of their income on housing costs. About 27% of homeowners with mortgages are considered housing cost burdened as of 2019. So there certainly are folks and households in the county, both renter and owner, that are spending more of their income on housing costs. So for an owner, that includes your taxes, your utilities, your insurance. For a renter, that includes your utilities, your renter's insurance. So, it is important that we look at at and consider what can people afford? What can the workforce of Polk County afford as it relates to housing costs? So who is the workforce of Polk County? What are the primary jobs and occupations in the county, and what do those folks typically make? That's one way that we can look at what they can afford as it relates to housing costs. So on the screen, I have the 2019 county median household income. It's around 60,000 for Polk County. Generally speaking, a low and moderate income household is classified as one that makes 80% or less of the area median income. Again, some programs define that based on household size, family income. So there are some metrics, but this is just an easy way for people to understand and just a general way to classify. So what's shown in the table is the top 20 occupations based on job count as of 2019 in Polk County, along with the median hourly earnings and the median annual earnings. Many of these jobs, if you take a look at them, you probably know several of your neighbors, your friends, your family that fall into one of these top 20 occupations. They make up the majority of folks working in the county. Many of these people and the jobs are people that we'd want to have in our community and live in our community. So you can see, looking at the what is considered low and moderate income, so around that $48,000, many of the top occupations, assuming a single income earner, but even if you had two income earners on here, it could be close. Many of these occupations fall below that and would be considered a low and moderate income. Now, diving further into the Department of Housing and Urban Development's income limit qualifications for assistance programs, in 2019, a four-person family with a family income of about $55,000 would be classified as low income. If you take a look at the top jobs in the county as of 2019, it's possible that many working families in the county, if you had two income earners and two children, would fit into those income limits. So when we talk about affordability, it applies to the workforce and making sure that they have a place, an affordable place, an attainable place in which they can live to be able to work in the county. Many seniors on limited incomes might also fall into this low and moderate income classification. So what can Polk County households afford? Looking at rental price points, just to give an idea, I looked at the incomes of all existing households and their incomes in the county. Now, these folks are already living in your county. They live somewhere. They either rent a unit or they own a unit. So these are just existing households, but it gives you an idea of the income levels and what they can afford. You also have to factor in, while we use the 30%, affordability standard, there are other costs, and those costs are increasing as well. The cost of childcare, all of these things, student loans, other cost of living expenses. So the 2019, as I mentioned before, median gross rent was $756. So there's over 3,000 households in the county, at least as of the 2019 data, that cannot afford that median income. 695 based on their household income. The maximum that they could afford at that 30%, trying to keep it affordable, would be $250. Again, kind of doing the same type of analysis for households as it relates to what can they afford in terms of owner opportunities. General rule of thumb is that a household can afford to buy a house that's 2.5 times the household income. Now, some folks can buy more, some folks have to buy less because of those other costs of living expenses. So using this kind of analysis, looking at all 18,450 households as of the 2019 data and using that 2.5 times the household income, there's over 14,000 households, or 77% as of 2019, that based on household income alone at 2.5 times the household income would not be able to afford a $250,000 home. The median sale price for Polk County, I took a look at that as of February 2021, was 225,000. Now that's for existing sales. That could, I'm venturing to guess for those contractor and builder folks on the line, that 225,000, a new home, certainly far exceeds, new construction certainly far exceeds that. So that's existing homes. If there are any for sale, the median price was 225,000. So we need to keep that in mind. And I'll also note just briefly, I don't think that Terry mentioned this. This presentation, it may seem that I'm going through it slow. I have a lot of information, or going through it fast, a lot of information that I want to share. Terry will be receiving a copy of this, and he'll post it on his website and probably share it for those that are interested in looking at the data and the numbers further. As it relates to housing demand, the 2020 housing study, it was adopted and provided in 2020 for the county. Again, looking at that 2017 as our kind of base mark data, prepared some housing demand projections for the county. This methodology utilized the existing mix. So as of 2017, the mix was 22% renter and 78% owner. It assumed that there was a number of rental units, so 170 units were estimated to be vacant as of 2017. So from the rental side of things, utilizing household projections and forecasting and projecting that out to 2040, and there was a need, and the demand was about 1,100 to 1,200 new rental units based on the state's household projections. You'll see in 2040, that number is 0. And that is because by 2040, the number of households is starting to decline. So you don't need any new, units to accommodate a negative growth. Looking at owner units and the owner occupancy side, based on those household projections, it's estimated, applying that same kind of methodology, that about 3,700 to 3,800 units of new owner occupied housing would be needed to accommodate the household projections that are projected by the state. Again, these numbers, it's not so important to look at the number. So it's not important to say, okay, by 2020, we need 315. It's more important to look at the trends. What is it? It's clear that additional housing, both from the renter side as well as the owner side, are needed if the county wants to achieve and continue to grow. The same methodology was applied to the communities that participated. So if you're interested in seeing what those specific community numbers are, you could certainly take a look at those individual studies that are on the Polk County EDC website. So beyond, as I mentioned, these projections were based on the state's household projections. Beyond that, there are other opportunities for the county to continue to grow. What's shown on the screen here is what is referred to as an inflow-outflow diagram. It's talking and focused on commuters. So what this shows is, this is 2018 data. That's the most recent data that the census has as it relates to commuters. There are about 8,700 folks, so 8,733 people who live in Polk County and work in Polk County. There are 13,265 people who live in Polk County but are leaving the county for work. It doesn't mean, the arrow doesn't mean that they're headed to the east. For many, they're probably headed to the west. And you can see, they're headed, the top communities in which those 13,000 folks are going to for work: New Richmond, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Hudson, Marshfield, Menominee, Bayport. Again, they are working, or they are living in Polk County, but working outside of the county. Additionally, we have about 6,000 people, and this is where the opportunity comes to perhaps capture some of the commuters. About 6,000 people live outside of Polk County, but come into the county for work. Where are they coming from? They're coming from New Richmond, Eau Claire, Menominee, Lindstrom, Turtle Lake, Cumberland, Forest Lake, Hudson, North Branch. So if you create an environment, and create a quality of life where people might want to come and live in the county, as well as, just as Polk County is looking to attract and retain its workforce, so is every other county in the region. So it's important that you do your best as well to keep those people that are living in the county and working outside of the county. Look for quality of life amenities that you can provide to keep them there. So there is, opportunity to capture some of those folks. About 18.5% of the workers in Polk County live in that Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington area. That includes St. Croix and Pierce counties as well. So that's 2,700 of those 5,800 people live in those areas. As part of the county housing-wide study, we worked with UW River Falls Survey Research Center to conduct a workforce survey. And now part of that workforce survey, we did survey existing households in Polk County, but we also attempted to get some information from those who are working in the county but are living outside of the county. Again, to look at, okay, there's these 6,000 people that are living outside but working in Polk County. Is there potential or any interest? What is their interest in perhaps relocating to Polk County? Now, of those surveyed, about 60 employees responded to the survey. So it's not a significant, sample size. It's not representative of everyone who is living outside and working in the county. Most of those who responded worked in either Osceola at Polaris, OMC, or Northwire, or Balsam Lake, primarily at the Polk County Government Center. 40% of those who responded, those 60 respondents, lived in St. Croix County, 23% in Chisago County, and 15% in Burnett County. More than half, so about 57% of the employees survey respondents drive at least 25 minutes to get to their work site. So they are spending, at least 25 minutes one way to get to their job each day. What I find interesting, and again, this is a small sample size, a small survey response, but 46% of the workers who were commuting who responded said they would be willing to move to the community in which they work. So that's, that's about, 25 or 30 folks who expressed an interest in relocating to Polk County where they work. The top 3 housing challenges that those respondents said as it relates to housing in Polk County, cost of buying a home far outweighed all the other responses. Property taxes was also a key response, which isn't surprising. That's typically, identified as a challenge, as well as the cost of land. So those 3 things were really the top 3 for those 60 employees who responded to the survey. So how has COVID changed things? What are some implications? Obviously, it'll take some time to see how the data progresses. It'll be a couple years until we know the real impact as it relates to the economy and really every aspect of our lives. But there was an August 2020 report by a firm titled The 2020 Pandemic Recession, and it identified some future trends. And I think these are really applicable, specifically as it relates to things that could happen in rural America and Polk County, for example. So there were 4, main changes or trends that they saw and identified that could accelerate in rural America. 2, I think are of very important note, and that includes, an expanding remote work. So with telecommuting and expanding capabilities to work remotely and not be in the office, certainly that has implications for rural communities. And that gets to the second main point, which is the more urban to rural migration. Their work has documented that urban to rural migration, particularly among 30-year-olds. Based on field observations, they're also seeing a growing and underlying trend of this for retiring boomers moving back to more rural communities, from small rural-based metros to even very rural villages and towns. But what they do note is that communities have to position themselves. They have to position themselves as truly welcoming communities to optimize this migration movement. I mentioned before how important quality of life is in terms of creating an attractive environment that people want to either move to or stay in and live in. So quality of life, broadband, housing, employment, per this study, there are two amenities that are prerequisites for attracting Americans to rural communities. Those two things are robust and affordable broadband and a welcoming culture with respect to diversity. And just this morning, a coworker informed me in a regional broadband meeting, Bruce King, who is with the Realtors Association, said that the number one question now, post-COVID, of rural realtors from potential home buyers is, how is the broadband? It's not just about building and providing housing, but it's really about providing these other quality of life amenities that will attract folks to your community. So it's important that you think of that and don't think of housing just in isolation, that if we build, we just need to produce houses and build houses. It really gets beyond that and gets to community building and quality of life. Some additional housing preferences based on the survey that was done as part of the Polk County Housing Study. Affordability is number one for renters. So they're looking at what can I afford when they make their housing decision. 63% of renters surveyed in the county hope to own a home within 5 years. They preferred smaller starter homes. Again, it probably relates to that decreasing household size that we talked about earlier. Majority of owners desire country lifestyle with larger homes and lots, and there's a desire to age in place and age in community by seniors. Some additional housing highlights. So I had a number of interviews with different folks throughout the county. Really, the top things that came up were the need for senior housing, both market rate and affordable. A single level living, so that twin home where they have single level, low maintenance type of living is in high demand. There's a need for entry level housing available for the workforce, especially those in the production industry. So your manufacturers, your assemblers, that type of workforce. A need for affordable family rental units, and then just a need for quality rental units. And as I mentioned before, it's really just the whole gamut of housing that's really needed. There's just a lack of housing in general in the county. Now we'll touch on some development costs. So the cost of infrastructure has increased significantly. Now, as of 2019, the cost had increased by about 69% in the last 10 years. That I'm sure is even much greater. Again, folks on the line that have a better pulse on that can probably attest to that. I'm sure that number has increased significantly. Cost of building materials, as we know, they have significantly increased as well. Back when I did the study, I had talked to a builder and he said in 2010, he could have built a house in the county for about 100 to 105 dollars per square foot. The average house as of 2019 per that builder was about $210 per square foot. I venture to guess again that 210 is probably higher, as we know the cost of lumber and other construction materials have increased. There's also a severe labor shortage in the construction industry, and that's a workforce challenge as well. Just today on the radio, there was a discussion on this, and that the construction sector of the economy continues to look for talent and struggles to get talent. And as a result, they're trying to keep up. And so builders have choices. They can find work in Polk County. They can find work across the border. They can go to St. Croix County. So it is important that the county and communities position themselves in the best way possible to be prepared to, have conversations and be ready for development. A developer needs to be able to recoup the cost to make a profit. I recently heard again from another community within Polk County, actually, that they were looking to put in a 20 lot single family subdivision. That infrastructure, so street, water, sewer, came back at about $2 million. If you do the math, that's about $100,000 per lot. That's just right there. That's not the land cost. That's not the construction materials, the time. So, a developer, builder they're in the industry to make money and to make a profit. And so it is important that we look at these things. Some housing goals based on the housing study: build more owner and renter units, look at affordability, look at starter homes, as well as move up homes and housing for seniors, allow for and encourage a full range of housing and provide variety. So it's really about shifting and balancing the market. If you build some new senior housing, that might open up, their existing single family homes that they're in, and you could balance, balance that could potentially help balance or at least address some of that, the housing need. So as we talk about housing strategies, throughout the study, we kind of took a two kind of equation approach. So our goal: housing for all, workforce housing, market rate, housing for income constrained, affordable housing. We looked at, there are really kind of two things that work towards that, two sides of the equation that work towards meeting that housing for all approach: reducing development costs and assisting with housing costs. And so I'm going to quickly run through these, not going to spend too much time on them, but hopefully it'll get you thinking about what your community and the county could do as it relates to, some of these strategies. So reducing development costs. As I talked about, infrastructure is a significant cost. So you may look to install the necessary infrastructure. So streets, utilities, prep the land and have it ready for development, or you might provide the land for development. Now, these two things alone don't necessarily lead to, housing that's attainable or affordable for the workforce, but it certainly would, reduce those housing costs. Minimize regulatory barriers. Make the process simple, short, and transparent, and evaluate your zoning regulations. Are they flexible? Does your community, does the county know its process? Or if I want to build a subdivision, what do I have to do? Who do I contact? What's the process? What are my fees? What are the requirements? So there's a lot of things. It's not uncommon for me to speak with people, not necessarily in Polk County, but other communities in our region. And they don't know exactly the steps for the development process. It's important that you have those things in order. Perhaps there's one point of contact in your community, and you could make that known, or one point of contact at the county for having that information as it relates to your process. Streamline the development review process. If it's going to take a developer, 2 years to get through the process or navigate that process in 2 years, if it's going to take them, 6 months to get approval, a year to get approvals, time is money. And if there's another county community that has their process more simplified, they'll go elsewhere. You could look to consider reducing permit fees for projects that include affordable or workforce housing units. Other ideas: contribute financially. So maybe you're not installing the infrastructure, but maybe you're contributing, financially to the project. So utilizing some financial sources such as tax incremental financing or revolving loan fund or other financial tools that local government has, contributing to that residential development. Perhaps it's paying for some of that infrastructure, paying for the costs of things associated with the project. Encourage a developer to participate in local, state, federal programs or housing tax credit programs, historic tax credits, and other programs that they could look to kind of reduce some of those costs. Explore the possibility, this is what I mentioned before in terms of installing the infrastructure. Consider the community serving in that development role. I don't think that this has been done too much within our region. I do know from another presentation that was done at the city of Shullsburg in Lafayette County, southwest part of the state. It appears that they are an example. Looks like maybe the land was donated. From what I could see, I have a call into the city, but didn't get a response back in time for this presentation. But looks like the land was maybe donated. They installed the infrastructure, and now they're selling the lots for $1. Now you might say $1, how can they recoup their costs? Well, over time, that is going to generate additional tax revenue. And so I think they're seeing it as an opportunity. The last I knew from the previous presentation, it sounded like there was a significant interest. There were maybe 6 closings right away, but I don't have enough. That's just a case study that you could look into more regarding that. And then also corporate participation. It's important. Again, we're talking about workforce issues and housing as it relates to workforce. Get your corporations involved. Businesses need to be at the table. I think that's really important. A case study of this in Westfield, Wisconsin, and I had some discussions or conversations regarding this project. I'm not sure where it's at in the process, if it actually went through, but Breakbush Chicken in Westfield, Wisconsin. They were working with a developer on some workforce housing. They were able to get the price down to about $100 per square foot. Rent them out. I think a 2-bedroom at that time, it was at least planned to be $850 to $900, $950 for a 3-bedroom. But the difference there is, Breakbush, they were providing the financing. So it was a local individual, local company investing in the project. And all that they really, were looking for, they essentially wanted their money back with a small return. So you have some reduced equity you're getting instead of, looking to larger investors. It was more of a local investment. I'm not going to spend too much time or details on the next 2 slides, but the point of these 2 slides, and you can look at them in more detail, I wanted to include them so you had them. The point is that putting a financial package together is complicated and hard, especially for some of those workforce, income constrained units. This was an example, Moving Out, who is a housing developer. In this example, they said that you need about 40 rental units to cash flow in rural Wisconsin. The development, their development costs were about $8.3 million. And even with the land and infrastructure donated, they still had about a gap of $1.2 million. So, and that was with those donations and the low income housing tax credit. So even with those things, it's hard to get housing costs down. So how can communities assist? Again, maybe it's looking at tax increment financing or some other type of financial participation. The right-hand side of the equation, we've got assisting with housing costs. So looking at supporting financial programs, educating households on participation in programs. Again, another way that corporate participation can come to the table is through employer assistance housing programs. And one of those is Home Sweet Menominee in our region. In Menominee, we're local employers, City of Menominee, and some other partners kind of pooled together, came up with a fund. They provide a 0% loan of up to $10,000 as an employee of a participating employer for home purchase in Menominee. Some other housing strategies: integrating multifamily, allow for a mix of different housing types. You might need to think outside of the box to what your traditional housing format and style has been. Allow for different housing types. So what you see at the top of the right-hand side of the screen, that looks like a single family home, but it's actually 4 dwelling units. So it's about incorporating other housing types into your community. Looking at your regulations, what do your regulations allow for? Do you have minimum lot sizes that are quite large? Maybe you look to reduce those. Maybe you allow for accessory dwelling units. So perhaps what you see on the bottom right, which is a housing unit above a garage on the second floor there. So finding smaller ways to incorporate different housing types into your community. Another strategy: marketing the county's housing needs. And I think Terry and the EDC Housing Committee are already, working on this. Look at your deteriorating housing stock. Again, that plays a significant role in how much someone can afford. If you're looking to sell a home and then there's $50,000, $75,000 of improvements that needs to be done to the 60-year-old home, that just adds another level of complication. We talked about enrollment in the lack of contractors, the lack of labor force in the construction trades. Maybe explore partnerships with high schools. Consider infill and redevelopment. Are there opportunities? I know when I was speaking with the village of Clear Lake, for example, the topography of the community was such that any additional lands that would be available for development in the future required lift stations, and that's a significant investment. But one individual that I spoke with, she said, well, there is a site, it has an existing building downtown, maybe there are opportunities to redevelop that site. And so it's thinking outside of the box and not being afraid to explore potential options and solutions. Again, don't forget about your senior housing. These are some examples, at least the Overlook Corda condominiums. Many seniors live there. That's a highly desired product. Osceola Village Apartments, that's not a senior specific product, but when I spoke, is a highly desired product. When I spoke with them back in 2019, there were 150 to 200 individuals on their waiting list. So some other housing priorities, just transitional housing, and then advocating for programs and policies at the federal and state levels that can help address some of your housing needs. For example, I know there has been talk, perhaps there's a workforce housing tax increment district that could be created, or extending the timeline for the affordable housing extension that's allowed. So work with your legislators. I know, Representative Dave Armstrong, he's also the director of the Barron County EDC. He's been active in some of these initiatives. And I know that Terry, has had conversations with him regarding some of these items as well. It's there's not one solution to solving the housing challenges. It's going to take several partners and strategies. And so one of the things that was prepared as part of the housing study was the housing toolbox. And so certainly take a look at that, provide some examples, details of different partners, different funding sources, different, regulatory things that communities can look at to make adjustments. So what are some common hurdles and potential solutions? And I know my time is somewhat limited, but I'm going to try to get through these as quick as I can, because I do think it's important. So common hurdles for communities, what I've heard, and I think you all probably can agree with these, is we don't have any land for development. Cost of infrastructure. How do we pay for these things? How do we create development ready sites? How do we attract a developer or builder to build within the community? Some of the common hurdles from the development side, there's no land available within your community. How can I develop or build? There's a lack of development ready land. So if I'm a builder and I have someone interested, or I want to build some homes, there's no land ready. And again, that infrastructure just costs too much for me to try to recoup based on the incomes and the values of the county. Unclear or challenging development process. We talked about that. Regulations that limit density or prohibit new housing types. Neighborhood opposition. If the neighbors, if the community isn't, they can really stall a process, and that can become a big challenge and a hurdle for a developer or even a builder. Sometimes they're one and the same, sometimes they're different. So, trying to overcome that and educate the public, and that's what we attempted to do as part of the housing study process, was to provide some information on different housing types. And then the cost of construction exceeds the achievable rents or values based on local incomes. So I'm going to work to hopefully provide some light or some things to consider to maybe work towards overcoming, or I won't say solving the challenges, because they'll always be present, but work to address some of those challenges. So we talk about lack of land available for development. Really, communities need to be proactively partnering with their adjacent communities to address and kind of negotiate what's in the works as it relates to growth boundaries. And perhaps there are discussions on, cooperative annexation policies. Now, I know annexation, that's a scary word, and the resolutions aren't, and those conversations aren't always easy. But by having those conversations up front, it does show your willingness to at least work together towards a common goal. In the end, compromise, it'll save, and it'll be worth it to have those conversations. So work with your communities. What's on the screen here is an example. This was done as part of this is not in Polk County. This is in Barron County, the city of Cumberland. What we did was, as part of their comprehensive plan, so their long range plan, looked at what land could be available for development, and then what lands are within their extraterritorial, their kind of jurisdiction review, in terms of them having some review over those land areas to make sure that in the future, what's developed in that yellow buffered boundary is compatible. So that's just one example. Certainly, if you're looking at updating your comprehensive plan, take that into consideration. We did Appendix C of the county's housing study provides a development potential map for all 8 cities and villages that participated in the study. This was our attempt to at least start that conversation and have communities. Now, I'm not saying what's shown on here, this is Village of Osceola. I'm sure, much has changed, but this, at least use this map, start it as a conversation, use it as a base, a framework for starting to identify what are some key sites. And I know the Village of Osceola, I believe, has already done that. So your community, should also be looking at that. So how do we pay for infrastructure, the cost of infrastructure? One potential option, again, is the use of tax increment finance, the affordable housing extension. So state statute provides a process by which you can extend the life of a tax increment financing district for 1 year to promote affordable housing. The community has to adopt that. At least 75% of that increment, so that money that you might have, you'd extend that 1 year increment, needs to go to benefit affordable housing. And again, affordable housing means housing costing no more than 30% of a household's gross monthly income. So there's some flexibility, I think, as to how that increment can be used and generated. I know the city of Chippewa Falls, they recently, have created a program, and their program, it's called Build Chippewa Falls. And it's a program here within our region, might be worth looking into. It'll create 5 new programs focused on curb appeal, downtown housing, renovation, first-time home buyer, and property acquisition. So a variety of things that they're looking to use that 1 year of extra increment to improve their housing situation. I know Amory and the Village of Milltown, I know they both have approved extensions that under this 1 year affordable housing extension. I don't think they have the details in terms of what they're looking to use it for, but perhaps some of those things. Clear Lake, I looked at the tax increment district. It looks like the Village of Clear Lake, they have one expiring in 2022 and Luck in 2024. So certainly keep those things in mind. And then really just to kind of wrap up here, it's really about being housing ready. How can you work to entice developers to make an investment in the county or a specific community? How can you engage developers and builders in a clear, simple, and creative manner? We might be used to building and developing one type of product, or our communities look one certain way, but that product might need to change, and you might need to think outside of the box and get creative with some of your solutions. Review your rules and regulations. I think, to me, this is a low-hanging fruit item. It's something that a village, a city can easily do. Look at what your minimum lot sizes are. What are your minimum home sizes? Do you have a minimum square footage requirement that you're requiring builders to build? If they have to build at that square footage size, they have no opportunity then to reduce the costs by building a smaller home that could maybe accommodate a smaller household size. Incentives can help and are often needed. I know, you might not like to hear it, but if you provide incentives, like I mentioned earlier, developers and builders, I spoke with lender in the region recently, and she said, they can go across the river. They have options. And so it's about making your community the most attractive and incentivizing, development to occur there. And then sharing the county's housing needs, share your plans that have been done. And work together. Consider the needs within the county. How can your community contribute to meeting those needs? I think Ben from the Village of Osceola, he said it best. Village of Osceola held a housing session, and he said, we're Polk County. We're not just individual communities in the county. So how can we work together? And I think, if the county sets some specific goals and we can find ways for communities to work towards those goals, I think that will go a long way. Unfortunately, there's not one easy solution. Like I mentioned, it'll take several initiatives, several players to make progress on strengthening the county's housing market. But hopefully this gave you some ideas and things to work towards as you move forward in continuing to explore those opportunities for housing in Polk County. So with that, I think I'll wrap it up here and turn it over to you, Terry.
Yeah, Susan, thank you so much. That's a ton of information to try and wrap your head around in an hour. So, just incredible that you could pull that together. And thank you for doing that.
Sure.
I did want to mention for those that might be newer to the study and what it holds, all of the study materials, which is hundreds of pages of materials and study input, right down to each individual municipality that participated, is available on the Polk County EDC website. I'll send along a link along with the slides that I'll be following up with and a recording of this session tonight. But feel free to access that, because as Susan mentioned, it's really important that no matter what your interest level particularly is in the housing market, that everybody get involved and work with their local municipalities. There's no doubt the need is there. If anything, it's gotten much worse due to the civil unrest and the pandemic. You talk to any realtor or anyone involved in the building industry or any of those, that the county is needing further housing. Employers are looking for qualified candidates they can't find housing for. The need is there, and it's up to us as citizens within Polk County to get involved and try and help some of these initiatives move forward and work with the counties to try and make it work. So that's some of the goals that we have for our housing committee, is to come up with tools and just to have some of the villages and townships and cities think about what are the tools that are available. Have they considered this or have they considered that? Susan had a lot of good examples here of different ways to use housing. Aaron Sundin in the chat area, I don't know if you've been following that, Susan, but had some great comments as well, along with Joe Folsom. But I know we only have a few minutes left, but I said we'd have time for comments, and I want to leave a little time. No one has sent in a comment, but I figured, they were probably just overwhelmed by all the information they saw. But this is a great opportunity to use Susan's knowledge and experience. Everyone is muted currently, so if you have a question, just unmute yourself. And there's no, if you're not sure how to do that, just shoot me a quick chat and I'll unmute you. So, anybody have a question or an observation that maybe an idea or something that wasn't presented tonight that would be beneficial?
Susan, Aaron Sundin here. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm good.
Good.
So can you talk a little bit about any private-public partnerships you've seen when it comes to like housing? And I'll give a quick example. I shared this with Terry. So in a former career, I did a lot of traveling, and Detroit, Michigan was one of in my territory. And of course, Detroit had all kinds of different issues, and it's not really anything like Polk County. But what ended up happening was there was a lot of property there that was condemned and owned by the city, and you had a private developer come in, fix it up, move their employees into that area at discounts, where they could come in. If they worked for the company for X amount of years, they'd basically get either their rent free or the house for free. And then you had other people doing it, like some of the hospitals and health centers and everything else. That's an extreme example of that. But I do know that there are some businesses out there that might be, they're struggling with this issue of keeping employees and retaining people. Do you know of any companies out there that you've seen in the state of Wisconsin that have contributed money to be able to come in and, help with affordable housing or rentals or even supplements for their employees?
Sure. Well, it might not be, the example exactly that you're speaking to, but I think even the programs like Sweet Home Menominee and Live It Up Wausau, those are two, corporate participation programs. I can't say beyond those. I mean, again, I don't know if that Westfield Breakbush, example, but essentially they were paying for a developer to develop housing that would meet their workforce needs. It was for these employers. I think that others maybe could live there. That's what I had heard. I want to say that even Abbeyland, there had been some conversations there. They had some, housing challenges. I can't say, I'll have to give that some thought, Aaron. If I have any additional examples, I'll certainly forward them to Terry. I could do a little research and see what I can come up with beyond those.
Thank you. Terry in the chat, this is Aaron again. I hate to be doing all the talking here, but you told me I had to speak up. So I put in the chat, I think in the short term, because we're dealing with this in St. Clair County too. I know Joe's dealing it with in Pierce County. It's all over the state, all over the country. Some short-term solutions or ideas here would be thinking about opportunities to, redevelop areas to come in and create rentals or create condos, whatever you want to do. Because again, construction costs, as everybody knows, are way up there. And I work for a construction company. We do developing, and it's hard to get developers to come in and build an affordable product right now just because of a lot of variables. So in the short term, thinking along the lines of, hey, is there a property out there that we don't know what's going to happen through COVID here, where some businesses, some properties may end up going into foreclosure, may end up needing to sell. So thinking outside that box of, hey, can we take this old hotel and turn it into affordable housing or things like that? I think it's important for people to look for those opportunities.
Absolutely, Aaron. And I would just mention, yeah, I mean, as it relates to rehabilitation, now this photo, this actually, when we worked with Barron County, this is in Cumberland, and it's the old Opera House, I believe. Now they haven't done anything, but there have been conversations, how could we take this? Maybe this could be a really unique, housing conversion. So reusing what's buildings and properties that are not currently being used for residential, but adapting them and reusing them for housing. And even as you mentioned in the chat, looking to convert houses, into the duplexes or fourplexes. As you can see from this slide, it still maintains that residential character of the community. You're just increasing, and providing 3 additional units as opposed to just that one.
Susan, this is Dave Lundy. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is there someone at the state of Wisconsin that you work with or that you know of that we could use or we could send our developers or builders off to explain the grants and the available programs out there to help them do their paperwork and things that they need to help them fill out for affordable housing programs?
Yeah, so I don't know that the state, has such a coordinator or a facilitator. That's one of the things under facilitation is advocate for the state to facilitate or provide funding for a regional facilitator to assist communities and developers in financing and putting a package together. Those applications and those financial packages, it's difficult, as I mentioned. Each program probably has a different contact at the state. I know if you look in the toolbox, we have the different programs for, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, different WIDA programs. So I don't know that there's one person at the state, Dave, that I could, point you to. It'd be probably several different conversations depending on the program, in all honesty.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Well, we're 5 minutes over. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. Again, I want to thank Susan, and I really want to thank all the attendees because it's your involvement in these initiatives that are going to move the needle and have those discussions that need to be had. It's, as Susan said, it's thinking outside the box. It's doing a lot of things that are maybe seen as maybe non-traditional right now, but the need is already there. So we're kind of I guess you would say behind the eight ball, just to borrow another phrase, as far as we need to really start to address some of these things in order to figure this problem out, or we will lose out on a potential good opportunity for growth right here in Polk County. And I know there's many employers as I travel around that are looking forward to that growth and already have great jobs available for those that are looking for housing. So I guess we'll wrap it up for tonight. Again, Susan, thank you so much. I'll be forwarding these slides, the presentation, and a couple links to some of the information that we shared tonight. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. So thanks so much.
Yeah, and my contact information is here as well. If you have questions as you start to navigate things, don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We're happy to help how we can. Thanks.
Thank you. I know.